after now this quiz, hopefully that you're finishing up with is over. Part of this class, we don't really take a lot of quizzes. This was just to kind of see where you're at with some of the material that we've covered so far. This is definitely not a test, right? This is just kind of checking on where you're at. That was more of some of the democracy stuff of the American system that we've covered so far. Now we're going to look into more of the economic capitalism stuff that we need to talk about with this American system. So again, if you click on the Capitalism History Overview, 1900 to 1945, we're going to give you a little information about that right now. So I'm just going to kind of talk for, probably about 15 minutes. And then basically you're going to get a 4x1 discussion assigned to you that we will have not Monday, but Wednesday. So we'll do something different Monday in class, but basically your homework for the next week will be to prep for this conversation that we'll have that will be graded in class Wednesday, so a week from today. There'll be some reading you'll have to do and some questions you'll have to answer, but I'm going to give you a week to prepare for that and be ready for that, and that'll be your homework for the next week, okay? Does that make sense? Because I want you to be successful, I want to set you up for that. But we need to have some background of 1900 to 1945 of what's going on with our country's economy before you look at 1945 to the end of the 1990s, which is what your conversation and your 4x1 discussion will be kind of about. So see the big question that we have here about capitalism. Okay, to what extent does the capitalist economic system benefit people or benefit everyone? Typically in capitalism, we will have the haves and have-nots. Okay, unfortunately, you can make something of yourself with capitalism. You could make a good amount of money, a lot of money, or a decent amount of money, or you could really struggle. Part of that is based on a circumstance. Part of that is based on education. Part of that might also be based on who you know, not what you know. Okay, but this is something that we'll think about and look at and kind of cover together here. So let's kind of go through this together. It kind of starts with making sure we understand basically what it is, right? So capitalism is an economic system, but it's tied to the political system that we have, which is democracy. The reason for that is because our country and a democracy is based on people having say and power. It's also based on freedom, right? The whole concept of freedom. So capitalism is part of that, right? Business, private ownership, going for profits, right? The whole name of the game is making money, okay? So individuals, we need to get jobs in order to make money. Businesses need labor. They pay you to work. They have products that we consume and we buy. That's essentially capitalism. It's based on competition, which helps keep prices low. McDonald's and Burger King are competing for your sales, right? For your fast food business. Pepsi and Coca-Cola are competing for your soft drink business, right? Like this is an example of competition. Many other countries have this free market or capitalist system. Pretty much goes hand in hand with countries are democratic nations. So Great Britain would be an example. I mean, we got a lot of the Western European countries, although socialism is definitely a part of European countries as well. Here's the idea. And we put a couple of graphics together for you just to kind of give you a little idea. It's kind of an interesting concept. This is not necessarily all happy, but we put this on here because we thought we'd get a chuckle out of it, right? You work really hard. You make money. You buy things. You're consumers of products, and then you die. Okay? In the capitalist system, it's this economic idea of, hey, you got to go earn a wage, make money, to get food, to get housing, to get anything you want, you need to buy it. That makes you a consumer of products, and then you're done. That's it. That's the cycle. In the other graphic, we have kind of the allocation of wealth and resources, and in turn, who kind of controls things, right? So we have people, the planet, all living things on Earth that are, what we have, we live here, we have planet Earth. Planet Earth gives us resources. The governments control how much you have access to with that in some sense. Okay, we have corporations and banks, all the way to the financial elite. And usually with more money comes more control, and they exercise those things over the rest of us. And so that's part of the system. Now that doesn't seem very happy, but in the system you can make something of yourself. And that's what the free market system kind of prides itself on. Early 1900s, let's just make sure we understand some history here. We have this industrialization period where things become automated. We have factories, and we have like an assembly line. We have mass production. Never before had we had as much production capabilities as the early 1900s, and now obviously beyond. But before the early 1900s, we had people that were basically making a lot of their own things and selling things that they would make by hand. And it would, take a lot of time and energy. And then it was, cost of a fair amount of money because it was all done by hand and all custom-made things. Well, then we had this industrial age of growth of factories as a result of growth of cities. Bunch of people leaving the farms, going to the cities for jobs. We have tons of immigration into the United States at this time in the early 1900s. They become a huge labor force in these factories. So we have, just a ton of stuff happening at once in the early 1900s. We have a lot of people coming to the United States. We have a lot of factories. We have this mass production, so a ton of product available, and it's cheaper than ever before as a result. But it also led to a lot of issues. In the two pictures there on the right-hand side, you see, what do you see as a problem in this picture here? What could be an issue because of the growth of factories and cities? Go ahead, Zach.
Heavy pollution.
Heavy pollution, okay? So we have heavy air pollution in this sense, okay? So these big cities that had these factories also were very polluted, very unsanitary areas. There was not a lot of government regulation. It was just kind of let these businesses do whatever they want, and as a result, there was pollution. Also, what do we see in this picture below here? What seems to be the problem there? Yeah. Okay, we got dangerous work conditions. What type of age do you see here? Yeah, we got little kids, right? And so we had child labor at this time too. Part of that is to help provide for your family, everybody had to work. And so school wasn't yet mandated. Like, we didn't have public school mandates of, if you're this age to this age, you have to go to school. We didn't have that in place yet in the early 1900s. And so we had a ton of kids in the workforce. In fact, some small kids were really beneficial at certain factories because if machines broke down and it was very cramped to get a part fixed, small hands, small arms to reach and get these things fixed was good. The problem is there was a lot of work accidents as well. And so we have a lot of injuries, we have a lot of problems, and we have long hours and little pay, and it was just not a very good time. However, people did have jobs. A lot of people did have jobs. And we're making some money, okay? So there are some positives as well. This was also a time of great innovation. A lot of new products came about in the early 1900s. That's the other part of capitalism. Because of competition, it breeds innovation and new products. We see, even today, tons of new products coming out all the time. The next big thing in technology leads to a new phone being built, or a new gaming system being put into place, or new vehicles being produced that are cooler and better and have better features. And you get the picture. You've seen it all over the place. There's advertisements everywhere. Well, we have the telephone. We got new innovations with the automobile. We have motion pictures starting. We have all these different things going on. The light bulb revolutionized how much business could be done because now there's better quality light. Before that, they were using kerosene lamps, and we'd have all these factory fires, and you could hardly see because it was dull light. So we have these big innovations that are going to help with production and kick off our economy like never before in the early 1900s, okay? All right. But part of the problem in the early 1900s was also this idea that we had these huge barons that had the money, that they called titans of industry. We had probably like 90, I think it was like 90% of the wealth was in the hands of like 12 different people at this time. Like they literally owned the country. So that's not good, okay? This is where monopolies were coming in. And so we have, and here's a couple examples of different people. The names Carnegie, Rockefeller, okay, Vanderbilt, and J.P. Morgan were like these pillars. J.P. Morgan basically owned the banking. Rockefeller owned the oil. Carnegie owned the steel. Vanderbilt owned the railroads. And basically they ran the country and had all the money, which is kind of crazy. And all the little people who worked for them made peanuts, okay? And so this was a time of the wealth was in the hands of a select few, okay? However, because of all the innovations and a lot of people having jobs, there was starting to be a growth of a middle class emerging, okay? Now, these guys weren't all bad. They were billionaires by today's standards, but one thing that some of them did was they recognized how much money they had, and you can't possibly spend $1 billion. So it was, well, what can we do with this money that would also be helpful to other people? And specifically, Andrew Carnegie was steel, okay? So this is called robber barons or philanthropists. Were they just stealing all the money from the little people on the backs of the poor? Or were they out actually using their money to help? Well, probably a little bit of both. Carnegie definitely saw having this much money as, what can I do to help them with this much money? So he started universities, gave money to hospitals, gave money to schools, started some libraries. A couple of concert halls. There's something called Carnegie Hall in New York that's like a famous place for musicians to perform. So he saw his, part of his, what did he call it? There's a famous word and I can't even think of it. But basically responsibility for having all that money to do something with it productively, okay? So we do have that as well. All right, let's continue on. By the way, we do see some celebrities today that have a lot of money, that have organizations or charities or give out scholarships or these types of things. This is still something that happens today. But like I said earlier, the challenges of industrialization, we have overgrowth of these cities. Okay, we have millions of immigrants coming in the United States in the early 1900s. It's leading to they just overpacked cities. We have like these slums that start then because immigrants need a place to stay and they're being taken advantage of because they can't speak English and they have little money. So they're in these packed tenements that these are like one-room apartments basically with two families crammed in on the floor. We have disease and fire hazards spread as part of the problem because of the overcrowdedness and because of the rundown buildings. And then another piece of this is the government corruption, political corruption. We have something called political machines, and here's what happened. In order to get votes, these political organizations would find immigrants and say, hey, we'll get you a job, we'll find you a place to live, all you need to do for us is vote for our candidate. And it was illegal, and it became a corrupt means of getting candidates elected, and it lasted for over almost 50 years in some places of the country. one of the responses to this time period, coming out of the progressive era then, and reform movement, was laborers, workers organizing together to try to get better rights, and that's collective bargaining and unions. Okay, so let's say workers of a factory, hey, we're not getting paid very well, we're having these people get injured and they're just getting fired. Like, what do we do about that? We have to work these crazy hours, this dangerous work conditions, what do we do? And so the workers would join together and form a union. Now, do you think if you were a business owner, you would want your workers to join a union? Nope. And so there was major violence that occurred. These bosses, these owners would hire people to just beat people up if they tried to go on strike. They would try to prevent you from forming a union, but eventually these unions kind of became more available, okay, and happened. Workers would then be able to fight for better pay. We had the work week became Monday through Friday. It was like a 14-hour work week, then it became a 12, then it became a 10. Now we're typically at an 8-hour day, so 40 hours a week is typically a full-time worker. And then there's overtime, obviously, and you get what? You get benefited for working overtime. You get more money if you work overtime. Or if I work on a holiday, I might get holiday pay. These things never happened before unions, okay? And the unions, basically what they would try to do to get better rights was to say, we will all not show up to work, which is a strike, until you meet our demands, or at least negotiate with us, okay? Now, if there's just a few people unhappy about the job, and you're going to try to negotiate, you're going to just get fired. But if it's everybody, it's much harder to do that for, okay? Child labor, eventually that'll get made illegal, and again, then public education becomes mandated, which helps reduce that, or get rid of that, okay? Roaring 20s, we talked a little bit about it the other day with a group that had the Roaring 20s, but the big deal here was, hey, World War I was good for production of certain industries, but actually hurt farmers, and here's why. World War I was great for farmers because we had to overproduce to send crops and food over to Europe. However, as soon as the war was done, we had way too much. And what happens when you have a surplus of goods to the price of it? It goes way down. And so we had all these farmers that had way too much production. Their crops that were basically almost worthless. It was very little money for their crops, so farmers really struggled over the 1920s. The government tried to help out business by going, we won't overregulate business. We'll kind of let them do whatever. That term was laissez-faire. We'll just take our hands off and let businesses kind of do whatever. We think that'll help business. And it looked like for a lot of the 20s, that was a good policy. Business was booming. Things were pretty good. A lot of things being produced. And by the end of the 20s, we were overproducing in all our businesses as well. The stock market kept going up and up because it looked like business was good and people kept investing in the stock market, which is why the prices kept going up, because people put money into it. The problem was it wasn't accurately representing how the businesses were doing. And so the bottom kind of fell out of the market and on these businesses in 1929 when the stock market actually crashed. Part of the problem as well was something called installment buying. If I wanted a car that cost at this time, which was a lot of money, like $250, but I'm only getting paid $5 a week, that's kind of hard to afford a $250 car. Just like today, I can't go out and buy a $50,000 car because I don't have that kind of money. That's almost what I make in a whole year, right? So what do? Well, I put a little bit of down on it, right? And I pay the rest off over time, correct? Well, that's what installment buying was at this time. It was, I'll put $30 down on my $250 car, and every month I have to make another payment until I've paid that $250 off. Does that make sense? Well, the problem is people overextended. All these new products coming out, well, I want a washing machine, I want a vacuum cleaner, I want a car. but that costs money and I don't have that money. So I just keep buying on installment money, but I can't ever pay it off. And so again, things were collapsing financially in these banks, and with people going into massive debt and not being able to repay it. Okay? Have you heard of GDP? I think someone maybe mentioned it in one of their slideshows, but gross domestic product, which basically tells you how your country's doing economically, how much you're producing, and what the value of that is. Or so our GDP, if you notice, rose during the early 1900s. We have a big drop right after the 20s into the Great Depression. I already mentioned the market crashing leads to this horrible economic crisis. People are without jobs, businesses are failing, banks are failing. We actually even have it get worse for farmers. We have this big dust bowl, it's called, over the Great Plains. They had been practicing bad soil management. Then a huge drought happened where there was no rain, and basically the topsoil dried out and blew away, and it was called the Dust Bowl. There's nothing growing, so our farmers were even more devastated in the Great Depression. It was bad in the 20s, it got worse in the 30s. So not only do our factories failing, our businesses are failing there, but now our farmers are failing even worse. So there's so many people without jobs. In fact, at one point, 1 in 4 people didn't have a job. 1 in 4 people didn't have a job. It was horrible. Okay? FDR gets involved, so this is where we see the government get involved in the economy. FDR, the president that gets elected in 1932, decides the government needs to do something about this economic crisis. And so he comes up with a bunch of programs. It's affectionately known as the New Deal. They have all these acronyms like the CCC and the TVA and the WPA and all these different things. They stand for a bunch of stuff. But the whole point is we need to try to get people jobs. We need to help businesses. We need to help banks. And we need to get people back on their feet again. And so the whole idea was if we can provide relief, recovery, and reform, we will get our nation back on its feet again. Okay? And so that was helpful, but that didn't end the Depression. We don't have an end to the Depression until World War II starts. So in 1939, we have war that starts in Europe. The U.S. is not involved at all fighting that war, but we are supplying European nations with weapons and food and clothing and a bunch of other things, which helps us end our depression, gets people jobs again. Once we get involved in the war, then we're able to send a lot of people off to fight as soldiers. So just to give you a background of kind of the economy, how things are going from 1900 to 1945, hopefully that helps kind of set the stage for what we're going to ask you to do next. Okay, so what you're going to need to do, what you're going to need to do for Wednesday of next week. We're going to do something in class Monday, but for Wednesday of next week, here's what we want. If you notice, under modules, it says submit prep work here, Capitalism 4x1 discussion. I'd like you to open that. Once you open that, you should see something like this. So I just kind of gave you a very quick overview of early 1900s, like 1900 through World War II, kind of what was going on in our nation. Now we need to know after World War II, moving forward through the 90s, what did the economy look like in those time periods? Okay, what was going on? So if I click on the Capitalism 4x1 discussion and open that up, here's what I should have in front of me. Okay. Now, this should be a document that you can edit, I think. Otherwise, you have to make a copy. I can't remember. Yeah. But basically, you are going to do some readings, and you're going to respond to some questions. And this is all in preparation for next Wednesday in class, having this prepared to have conversations in small groups of 3 to 4 people. Okay? about these things. Now, this will be a graded discussion. I'll be popping around, and you'll also be filling some things out about if you were prepared, and then some of the things you guys talked about in their groups. But basically, here's what you got to do. So post-war economy, 45 to 60. You're going to read this stuff. Then you're going to respond to the questions, the thinking like historian questions, which are from the reading. And then the historical discussion questions, which are kind of opinion. Okay? So you notice there's one section. Another section, American economy of the 60s and 70s. There's a reading. There's a couple of graphs and charts. And then there's thinking like historian question, a couple more thinking like historian questions, and then some historical discussion questions, which those are your opinion. Now notice this part. The 70s economy, 80s is reading, but 70s economy and 90s economy are from something called Discovery Textbook. I need to show you how to access that. Okay, and I need to show you exactly how. So I'm going to use the 70s economy one as an example. So it says, read chapter 11.1, Explore tab, pages 2, 7, and 8 of your social studies textbook, U.S. History, Civil War to Present. So here's what I need you to do. On Discovery, or on Canvas, there is, on the left-hand side, at the very bottom, there is a spot for Discovery Education. So if I go to mine, it looks like this. On the left-hand side, at the bottom says Discovery Education. Should be at the very bottom of your kind of like list of things. Okay? Once you click on Discovery Education through the app, by the way, you got to be in the app, it will automatically log you in. So every student in DC Everest is automatically logged in to Discovery Education. I want everybody to try doing this right now. Once you get in, actually, would you mind airplane? I'm going to take my airplane off. I want to show everybody what it looks like. So I'm going to take my airplane off and I'm going to have Evan, I'm going to just have them see here. So if you go to 305, 7001. So once you click on Discovery Education, which I would like everyone to try, scroll down to the bottom, Evan. Click on Social Studies Textbook. Okay? First things first, check your course. Click that right up there, course. And make sure you're on Civil War to Present. Okay? Now you're going to see a bunch of chapters. And it says the first reading is like chapter 11, I think it was. So let's scroll down and find chapter 11. Okay? Stop. Yep. So 11.1. So I'm going to hit 11.1. And it said Explore tab. So I got to click on the Explore tab. And I think it said pages 2, 7, and 8. The pages are right here, right? So page 2, you click on that. There you go. I got to read page 2. I got to read page 7. I got to read page 8 and answer the questions, okay? And I think the 90s one has the same thing. It says, hey, go to, I think, chapter 13 for that one. I can't remember which. And it tells you a couple pages. So we're giving you a whole week to work on this. This is your homework for a week, is to do these readings, answer these questions, so that we can have a graded conversation, discussion next week, Wednesday, okay? If you're not able to access this, if you are unsure how to follow along, I can help you do that. We have 10 minutes left, so if you couldn't get on, we need to get you on, so you have the app.
Yeah, I got the app.
Go to the app. So then it'll log you right in. And then that's where you can go.
What?
So, if you're done, if you feel like you're good, you know what's going on, then you can wash off your spot and go. So then you scroll down to the red chapter right now.
You just want
Time here, Civil War to Present. Now we're good. Now we'll go down to 11.1. Load. More tab. 2, 7, 8. Yep. And that's just for that one section. There are other sections on there. Give you the readings and then the question more. Did you see that? if you need help, just come to see me, at least an hour, or, have Anderson help you.
Yeah, I'll be
Yeah,
coming
we
in
did pretty good.
on Friday.
Okay, awesome, sounds good. All right, see you guys.
See you, Jonathan.
See ya, Evan, it's good to have you back, man.